And here's another real life story. This one happened when I was quite a bit younger. I actually had written this one out back in 2013. The situation happened back in 1972. I entitled it, "I Resisted, but He Insisted." And I think you'll catch on to what that is. Oh yes, and my shirt, it says, "I do my own stunts." And my son Steven got it for me. Last year, 2024, out in Jackson Hole. Within a couple of weeks of him buying this and being on his trip, the meniscus in my left knee ripped off of the top of my tibia leg bone. So it was incredibly, almost prophetic. And here is the story of "I Resisted, but He Insisted." I was walking past the Denver Mint on a nearly perfect evening in early September. I had just eaten my meal of the day at the local burger place and was casually making my way back to the Episcopal Church, where I had stayed in the basement the previous 3 nights with other street people, indigents, and runaways. At 19 years of age, I'd left home one night near the end of August 1972 and hitchhiked from Monmouth County, New Jersey, to Denver, Colorado. I'd had enough of the long history of constant turmoil, criticism, and abuse in my family of origin. It had all escalated that summer after my younger brother Bob flunked out of college in his first year because of his partying and drug use. Not only was Bob using, he was also dealing drugs, my folks discovered. Unfortunately, according to my agnostic or atheistic father, giving my life to Jesus in the summer of 1972 was equally disturbing, and he made it clear that his hopes and dreams for both my brother and me were shattered. One night, I simply could take no more, and I made my escape. With $50 in my pocket, a sleeping bag, and a backpack full of clothes and snacks, I left for Colorado at 2:30 in the morning. My plan was to make it to Steamboat Springs and be a ski bum. God had other plans. A stranger approached me from the other direction, right there in front of the Denver Mint. I said, "Hi there." And he said, "And how are you this evening, my brother?" People in Colorado are much friendlier than most folks in New Jersey, but this stranger's greeting was above and beyond. Within moments, he correctly assessed that I'd not had much to eat that day, and he insisted that I go with him to get some food. I resisted, but he insisted. His name was Andy Witherspoon, and he told me that he worked construction in the Denver area and that he spent a lot of time helping street kids and runaways. He said that he lived outside of town somewhere and that since he gives away almost all the money he makes, everything he owns is in the modest gym bag he was carrying. Andy was a short, slight-built, middle-aged black man, and I wondered to myself how he'd be able to handle construction. Andy seemed to intuitively know a lot about me, but then I guess since he spends a lot of time with runaways, there's got to be some commonality. He understood my discomfort with the contrast between the abusive home situation and my newfound faith, and he did not condemn me for leaving, but he was concerned about the distance I'd come and the resentments I harbored. While we ate, he recommended that I go back home and be reconciled to my parents, who must be worried sick, he felt. This little man, who never finished 9th grade, strongly recommended continuing my college education, even though I didn't see the point, since, in my opinion, the Lord was coming back no later than 1980. Godly wisdom and counsel poured off this humble little man, but I was too hardened to receive it. Night fell, and Andy instructed me to watch how he dealt with an approaching panhandler. Only 6 or 7 minutes later, he sent the man away without having ever given the man what he thought he needed: money. Instead, Andy spoke respectfully into the man's heart and addressed his real need, which was spiritual. The man walked away content, even smiling, after only a few minutes' interaction with Andy Witherspoon. Such was the wisdom and love that this man exuded. Andy and I met a rich kid from Indiana who was severely physically disabled. The rich kid was living in an expensive Denver hotel. Andy treated this rich kid with the same respect and dignity with which he had met the panhandler only 30 minutes before. I realized that none of my professors at college had the wisdom or knowledge of this gentle man. No one I'd ever met spoke like Andy Witherspoon. Andy suggested that the guy from Indiana allow me to stay in his hotel room for the night. There was no need for me to go back to the Episcopal Church since everything I owned was on my back. You don't leave anything back at the flop house since it would be taken before you returned. I appreciated a clean, safe, quiet room that night and never thought I'd see Andy again. The next morning I awoke and left the hotel early. I was going to hitchhike to a church in a different part of town. 2 days earlier, I'd helped a couple of young pastors move some equipment and theatrical lighting. They invited me to a special Sunday morning musical at the First Church of the Nazarene on South Milwaukee Street, and I was determined to get there. I had hitchhiked over 1,500 miles in the last week, and now, trying to get to church only 7 miles away, on a Sunday morning, the police found me, ticketed me, and thankfully got me to the church on time. The only ticket I got during my whole trip was in the city of Denver trying to get to church. How ironic. I enjoyed the church production and was invited to stay for the potluck lunch they were serving afterward. One of the families that attended brought me back into town later in the afternoon and dropped me off near the bus station. I was planning to take the next bus to Steamboat Springs. God had other plans. By attending church that morning, I'd missed the early bus to Steamboat. The next bus didn't leave until Sunday night. I suddenly had lots of time to explore or just relax on another perfect afternoon in early September. I laid down on the grass in the middle of Denver's largest park and closed my eyes. I didn't even look up when I thought I heard my name, because after all, no one knows me, and I'm all alone in this huge park. The voice again clearly called Tim, and I sat up and looked around. Andy Witherspoon was no more than 150 feet away. He was not there when I laid down only 2 or 3 minutes before. I told him all about the church musical and getting a ticket from the police on my way to church and my plans for Steamboat and the schedule for the next bus and what I thought my future would look like. This time while we talked, I insisted that he go with me for something to eat, my treat. We found a local chicken place and sat together talking again. What a coincidence that I would happen to lay down in the park at the same time that you were there, in the same park and close enough for you to recognize me. Yeah, some coincidence. Andy did all he could to convince me to go home. He said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. And he told me again, go home, be reconciled to your parents, and go back to school. Don't worry about what you take or what kind of grades you get. Just go there and learn how to learn. And this from a man who said he never finished 9th grade. His words hit me hard. Truth was having an impact. God broke me right there, right then, sitting in a public eatery with a short, middle-aged black man. I can't stop crying. I kept turning my face toward the wall as Andy's wisdom and care challenged my plans and assuaged nearly 20 years of hurts and fears and criticism. Andy knew that the ski bum life would take me away from my newfound faith in God. He also knew that I had not received God's message the previous night. I swore to Andy that I would not go to Steamboat and that I would instead begin heading home. We must have said goodbye after finishing our meal, but all these years later, I simply can't remember. Instead of the 7:30 p.m. bus to Steamboat, I used all of my remaining money to buy a ticket to Omaha, Nebraska. That was as far as I could go on the money I had. 11:30 p.m. in Omaha, I began hitchhiking, headed east. A guy in his 30s picks me up in his little sports car. He was going to Illinois and could use the company to help him stay awake. He could also use some gas. His fuel gauge indicated less than 1/4 full. We started looking for gas as we left downtown Omaha and even pulled off the highway a couple of times, only to find gas stations closed. Remember, this is 1972. The stranger and I drove all night until nearly 6 a.m. before we found a gas station that was about to open. God had multiplied the fuel. It was a miracle. Come to think of it, Andy Witherspoon just happens to appear at two critical points in this journey with guidance from God specifically for me, and he claims to live outside of Denver someplace, but he has no car to get back and forth, and he claims to only have one change of clothes and a few incidentals in that gym bag of his. Andy claims to work in the construction industry, usually reserved for rough and tumble guys, not Andy's diminutive size and gentle character, and he gives away most of his money? I see. I think I'm beginning to understand. As it says in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it. Thanks for listening.